It was just after midnight on a cold Chicago night. A group of college freshmen, barely 18 years old, were doing something completely ordinary, something students have done on campuses across America for generations. They were walking together, talking, laughing, looking up at the sky. One of them was Sheridan Gorman, a bright-eyed 18-year-old from a loving family, just a few months into her very first year at Loyola University Chicago. She had her whole life ahead of her: scholarship, dreams, a future. And then, from behind a lighthouse at the end of a dark pier jutting out over Lake Michigan, something moved. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and Sheridan Gorman never made it back to her dorm. So who was hiding in the darkness that night? How did a peaceful walk between friends turn into a murder that would shake the entire city of Chicago? And why are so many people asking whether this tragedy could have been stopped long before it ever happened? Stay with me, because this story is not what it first appears to be. Chicago, Illinois, March 2026. A city already no stranger to headlines about violent crime. A city where debates about public safety, immigration policy, and institutional failure have been raging for years. A city where, on most nights, college students walk near the lakefront without a second thought. But on the morning of Thursday, March 19, 2026, one of those students did not come home. Sheridan Gorman was an 18-year-old freshman at Loyola University Chicago, a young woman who had barely begun the adventure of college life. She was killed on a pier near her campus in the Rogers Park neighborhood, shot in the back in what prosecutors would later describe as a cold, unprovoked, targeted attack by a stranger hiding in the dark. The case would move with stunning speed. Within days, a suspect was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and placed in custody. But the arrest did not quiet the storm that followed. It only made it louder. Because what investigators uncovered about the man accused of pulling that trigger would raise deeply uncomfortable questions, not just about one individual, but about the systems, the policies, and the decisions that may have placed a killer on that pier. In this video, we are going to walk through everything: the night Sheridan died, the investigation that followed, the man now charged with her murder, and the unresolved grief of a family demanding not just an arrest, but actual justice. This is the story of Sheridan Gorman. To understand why this case hit so many people so hard, you have to understand who Sheridan Gorman was. She was 18 years old, a freshman, brand new to college life, brand new to Chicago, brand new to everything that comes with stepping out of your childhood home and into the world on your own for the very first time. Loyola University Chicago sits right on the edge of Lake Michigan in the Rogers Park neighborhood on the city's far north side. It is a Jesuit university known for its strong community atmosphere, its academic reputation, and its stunning lakefront views. For many students, walking along the lake, especially at night when the city skyline lights up the water, is one of the great simple pleasures of being a Loyola student. Sheridan was doing exactly what thousands of students before her had done. She was making memories. Her family, in the days following her death, would paint a picture of a young woman who was full of life, full of promise, and full of the kind of bright-eyed optimism that only comes at 18 when the whole world still feels wide open. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what young people are supposed to do: growing, exploring, living. And then there is the other name in this story, Jose G. Medina, 25 years old, a Venezuelan national who, according to federal authorities, had entered the United States illegally. His path to that pier on that night winds through immigration enforcement's failures, missed court dates, and a system that critics would later say had every opportunity to intervene and didn't. Court documents would later reveal that Medina had previously faced a misdemeanor charge in 2023 for shoplifting, a minor charge perhaps, but when he failed to appear for his scheduled hearing, a warrant was issued for his arrest. That warrant sat, unexecuted, while Medina continued to live in Chicago, apparently undetected, apparently unreachable, apparently invisible to the very system that had flagged him. But nobody knew in those quiet days before March 19th that any of this was building towards something catastrophic. Nobody knew that on a cold night, just steps from Sheridan Gorman's dormitory, a man with a handgun was already watching, already waiting, already hiding. March 19th, 2026. Early morning, the kind of hour when the city is finally quiet. Sheridan Gorman and a group of her college friends decided to take a walk. It was the kind of spontaneous, youthful decision that needs no justification. Maybe someone suggested it. Maybe they'd heard the northern lights might be visible. Maybe they just wanted to see the skyline from the water. Whatever the reason, they walked from their dormitory toward Toby Prince Beach in Rogers Park, a stretch of Chicago lakefront that, in daylight, is the kind of place you'd take photographs. Families, dogs, joggers, the kind of place that feels safe, because in every measurable sense, it is supposed to be safe. They made their way toward a pier extending out over Lake Michigan. At the end of that pier stood a lighthouse, a landmark, a place that in any other context would have been a beautiful backdrop for a late-night photo. But in the darkness, behind that lighthouse, something was waiting. Prosecutors would later tell the court that Jose Medina had been hiding behind the lighthouse structure on the pier, not stumbling upon the group, not caught off guard, hiding, concealed, waiting in the dark with a handgun. As Sheridan and her friends walked to the end of the pier to take in the view, completely unaware, completely vulnerable, Medina allegedly stepped out from behind the lighthouse and opened fire. Sheridan was shot in the back. Her friends scattered. They ran, they hid, they did what every terrified human instinct screams to do in the face of sudden, incomprehensible violence. Some of them hit the ground, some took cover wherever they could find it. But Sheridan could not run. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Think about what that means for a moment. 1 second, she was standing at the end of a pier on a clear March night, probably looking out at the glittering skyline of one of the most iconic cities in America. The next second, she was gone. No warning, no reason, no mercy. She was 18 years old. The alleged shooter, according to prosecutors, was wearing a mask at the time of the attack. That detail is important because a mask does not suggest an impulsive, panicked act. A mask suggests preparation. A mask suggests that whoever put it on that night intended to avoid identification. This was not a random act of chaos. This was, according to everything prosecutors would later lay out in court, a premeditated ambush. A group of college students walking on a pier near their campus had been targeted by a man hiding in the shadows with a loaded gun and his face covered. After the shots were fired, Medina allegedly fled the scene. He disappeared into the surrounding neighborhood under the cover of darkness, leaving behind a dead teenager, a group of traumatized witnesses, and a city that was about to wake up to devastating news. But he did not disappear completely, because the streets of Rogers Park, like almost every urban neighborhood in modern America, are covered in surveillance cameras, and those cameras had been recording everything. When Chicago police arrived at Toby Prince Beach in the early hours of that Thursday morning, they found a scene that would define the next several days of intensive police work. A young woman dead on a pier, traumatized witnesses, shell casings, and a suspect who had vanished into the night. But the Chicago Police Department's Area 3 Detective Division moved fast, almost unnervingly fast, given the chaos of the initial scene. And the reason they were able to move so quickly came down to one crucial investigative tool: security video. Prosecutors would later reveal in court that surveillance footage from cameras positioned throughout the Rogers Park neighborhood had captured the suspect's movements after the shooting. Frame by frame, camera by camera, investigators were able to piece together a trail, a digital path that a masked man left behind as he made his way through the streets of Chicago's North Side after allegedly shooting an 18-year-old girl in the back. That trail led investigators to a specific building, a specific address, and inside that building to a specific individual. But security cameras alone do not make a murder case. Prosecutors needed more. What they found when they searched Medina's residence was critical. Inside the home, officers recovered a handgun, and forensic analysis would later confirm that the ballistics, the bullets, the markings, the trajectory matched the round that had killed Sheridan Gorman. The gun that killed her had been traced back to him. But the evidence didn't stop there. Medina was also identified by two additional sources: a building engineer and his own mother. The combination of surveillance footage, ballistic evidence, and witness identification gave prosecutors an extraordinarily tight evidentiary package for a case that was barely 48 hours old. On Friday, March 21st, just 2 days after the shooting, Chicago police announced charges. Jose G. Medina, 25 years old, was charged with first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault with discharge of a firearm, and 1 felony count of aggravated unlawful use of a weapon without a firearm owner's identification card. That last charge carries its own significance. In Illinois, a FOID card, a firearm owner's identification card, is legally required to possess a firearm. Medina, an undocumented immigrant with an outstanding warrant for failing to appear in court, had none. He had no legal right to that weapon, and yet there it was, loaded, fired, deadly. Before police even announced the charges publicly, another agency had already been notified. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, had issued an arrest detainer to local authorities, requesting that Medina not be released. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed that Medina was a Venezuelan national who had entered the United States illegally. And then came one more revelation, one that shifted the case from a local tragedy into a national flashpoint. When Medina was scheduled to appear in court for his detention hearing on Monday, March 24th, he didn't show, not because he had fled, but because he had been hospitalized. The reason? Tuberculosis. A man accused of murdering a college student on a pier was now being treated in a hospital for an active infectious disease. Court officials confirmed it. A judge ordered him detained in absentia, appointed a public defender, and scheduled a detention hearing for Friday. The revelation about Medina's prior 2023 shoplifting charge and the unexecuted bench warrant for his failure to appear only added more fuel to an already raging fire. Critics, family members, politicians, and members of the public were all asking the same question. How was this man still on the streets? How, with an outstanding warrant, with no legal status, with no FOID card, how was he free to hide behind a lighthouse with a gun and shoot an 18-year-old girl in the back? Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza spoke publicly about the case, saying that allowing Medina to remain free had done nothing to curtail what she called his illegal behavior. Chicago's 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez was even more direct, saying that non-citizens who choose to engage in dangerous criminal behavior should not be welcomed or given sanctuary. Governor J.B. Pritzker struck a different tone, calling for accountability but pushing back against what he described as the Trump administration politicizing the tragedy. He called for the reinstatement of federal funds for violence prevention and urged a focus on real solutions. Caught in the middle of all of this political firestorm was one family, a mother and a father, people who had dropped their daughter off at college just months earlier, full of hope and pride, and who were now burying her. As of the time this video was produced, the case against Jose G. Medina had not yet gone to trial. Charges had been filed, a judge had ordered him detained, a public defender had been appointed, but Medina remained hospitalized, and the full weight of the American legal system had not yet rendered its final judgment. What we do know is what the family of Sheridan Gorman chose to say publicly in the immediate aftermath of the arrest, and their words deserve to be heard carefully, because they did not speak in anger alone. They spoke with a precision and a clarity that made the grief hit even harder. In a formal statement, the Gorman family addressed what Sheridan was doing the night she was killed. They said plainly that what she was doing, walking with friends near her campus, was normal, that it was safe, that it is what students do every day. They rejected, explicitly and firmly, any framing that placed even a shadow of responsibility on their daughter. "We will not allow this to be dismissed as wrong place, wrong time," the statement read in part. This was not random misfortune. This was a violent and preventable act. Preventable. That word. Let it sit for a moment. The family did not just grieve, they demanded accountability from the systems that had failed their daughter. They called out directly what they described as release decisions, a lack of coordination, and an unwillingness to act. They said the consequences of those systemic failures are not abstract, they are real, and in their case, they are permanent. Permanent. Sheridan Gorman was 18 years old. She had her entire adult life in front of her. Every year she would have lived, every relationship she would have built, every dream she would have chased, all of it ended on a pier in Chicago on a cold March night. The charges against Medina carry enormous legal weight. First-degree murder in Illinois carries a potential sentence of 20 to 60 years in prison or even natural life without parole, depending on the circumstances of the crime and how the prosecution decides to pursue the case. With ballistic evidence, surveillance footage, and multiple witnesses, prosecutors appear to have constructed a formidable case. But for the Gorman family, a conviction, whenever it comes, will not be the end of this story. It will be, as they said themselves, only the first step toward justice, not justice itself. Because no verdict brings Sheridan back, no sentence erases the fact that she was standing on a pier at the end of a beautiful night, looking at the skyline of a city that was supposed to protect her, when a man stepped out of the shadows and took everything from her. There are cases that make you angry, cases that make you sad, and then there are cases like this one, cases that make you feel both things simultaneously and at full force, because there is simply no clean way to process what happened. Sheridan Gorman did nothing wrong. She was an 18-year-old college student in one of the most vibrant and storied cities in America, walking with her friends near her dormitory on a clear night. There is no version of that story where she deserved what happened to her. There is no caveat, no asterisk, no qualifier. She was innocent, she was young, and she is gone. But this case also forces us to confront something larger than one girl and one gunman on one pier. It forces us to look at the gaps in the systems we have built, the immigration enforcement systems, the criminal justice systems, the public safety networks, and ask whether those gaps are acceptable, whether the failures that allowed an individual with an outstanding warrant and no legal right to possess a firearm to remain free and armed on the streets of a major American city are failures we are willing to tolerate. Different people will answer that question differently, and this video is not here to tell you what political conclusion to draw. That is not what Sheridan Gorman's story is for, and it is not what her family deserves. What her family deserves, what she deserves, is for her story to be remembered accurately, not as a political prop, not as a talking point, but as the story of a real human being with a real name, real friends, a real family, and a real future that was stolen from her. Her name was Sheridan Gorman. She was 18 years old. She was a freshman at Loyola University Chicago. She wanted to see the skyline, maybe even the northern lights, from the end of a pier over Lake Michigan. And she never came home. If this case moved you, if this story matters to you, then let it mean something. Talk about it, share it, demand the kind of accountability that makes tragedies like this one less likely, not more political, not more divisive, but genuinely less likely. And for those of you who are parents, who dropped a child off at college this year, who watched them walk through the doors of a dormitory with a duffel bag and a new set of dreams, hold them a little tighter the next time you see them, because Sheridan's parents would give anything for that chance. If you want to see more cases like this one covered with the seriousness and respect they deserve, please subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below telling me what you think about this case, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video.